The world is unraveling. Gotham City has erupted into gang warfare. Black Adam is gathering metahumans around the globe. Support for them and Superman among the general public is at an all-time low. And everything is going exactly as planned. Hey everyone, if you like Comic Island, be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out our Patreon page in the video description below. Now let's talk about Doomsday Clock number 11. His name is Ozymandias. Lex Luthor encountered him not long ago, when the man claimed to be from another world. This stranger told Luthor that he staged an alien invasion on his home world, and united that Earth. However, in the end, Ozymandias' plans were exposed, and his world fell to nuclear war. So he came here to the Earth of Luthor and Superman, desperate to find the one being who could save his home. Desperate to find Dr. Manhattan. So, Doomsday Clock, a mini-series which really feels like at this point it has been running forever, is finally nearing its end. With just one more issue to go, we have a much bigger picture of this thing now, so I figured it might be nice to get into it a bit before the big ending. We certainly know a lot more about what's been going on throughout Rebirth and how it connects to the original Watchmen story. In that original story, after Ozymandias reveals his plan to the Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan elects to leave their world in search of more meaning. Doomsday Clock reveals that Dr. Manhattan explores the cosmos before discovering the universe of Superman and all the other heroes of the Prime Universe common to DC Comics. Here is where he learns a key piece of information that explains a lot, but had never really been firmly established in the New 52. The Prime Universe is a key point in the entire multiverse. What happens to it echoes throughout the multiverse, affecting the other 52 worlds, which are always a reflection of the Prime Earth. That is a nice little meta-narrative since it fits with how the writers operate in the DC universe to begin with. Then we learn a little bit more about what's going on with Rebirth specifically. All the meddling, the changes in Superman, the stuff with the White Lanterns, the return of Wally West. A lot of that seems to be connected with Dr. Manhattan's arrival and attempts to experiment with time in this new world. It seems like a lot of the thrust and mystery of Rebirth really just boils down to that, which is a little disappointing, but maybe there's more to it. With just one issue left, I'm not so convinced, but it's fine either way. I've definitely been enjoying Doomsday Clock more than I haven't, but it all does feel a little silly. DC seems to have stepped away from the whole Rebirth thing in general. It isn't really featured as a banner on a lot of covers anymore. I have no idea what's going on with Wally West after Heroes in Crisis, while the Year of the Villain seems to be moving everything in a totally different direction. I'm not necessarily against any of this, but as Doomsday Clock winds down so long after the fact, it feels like this Rebirth stuff is old news. If you had told me at the height of Rebirth that this would all really come down to Dr. Manhattan playing around with the DC universe without any specific goal in mind, well, I would have been a lot more annoyed by it than I am now. As it stands, it doesn't bother me as much as it probably should. I'm not about to write off Rebirth era as some sort of failure. A lot of DC publications are working far too well right now for that to be the case. But it does seem like DC has stepped away from a lot of the promises and hype of Rebirth, and if so, well, that's alright, but it does strike me as a bit curious. If so, why bother with all this stuff to begin with? Rebirth promised a lot of things. Brighter stories with new characters, new teams both behind the scenes and on the page, and a bold new narrative with hints of including their famous property, the characters from the Watchmen. A lot of people, myself included, were skeptical, but at first these comics were pretty legendary. Jan Jurgens came back to Superman like a thunderstorm, creating a slew of unforgettable stories about the Man of Steel. Tom King promised and at first delivered a Batman series unlike anything ever done before. Series like The Flash and Detective Comics were given a new sense of purpose and drive to them that didn't feel present in the New 52. And the Watchmen stuff was given enough vague mystery and sinister overtones to it that it was more intriguing than eye-rolling. A lot of this stuff is still intact, more or less, but if Doomsday Clock has taught me anything, it's that the Watchmen characters absolutely 100% do not belong in the DC universe. While I very much have enjoyed Doomsday Clock as a series, it has revealed just how out of place these Watchmen characters feel against the characters more commonly associated with DC. It works okay in Doomsday Clock where that's kind of the point. I like how maddening Dr. Manhattan finds the world of Superman, and the art style nicely evokes the original Watchmen series in a way that really comes together with the plot at hand. Doomsday Clock is pretty great in that regard. It tells its story fairly well and deals with the dichotomy of the DC universe and the Watchmen universe nicely, although I certainly have some issues. Jeff Johns always felt like an odd choice to follow up on Alan Moore's writing, but Johns has done a pretty good job in that regard. Some sequences feel like they could have easily fit in with some of Moore's writing. Other stuff feels tacky and vastly inferior. For example, I really don't buy a lot of the whole thing with protesters against Superman and the metahumans. It all just feels a little forced to me. I get the idea behind it, that Superman is getting blamed for a bunch of stuff, but it just feels like it has that flimsy sort of DCEU logic to it. I don't think this many people would care about something like this, or for that long, and I certainly don't believe they would all blame Superman for it. I'm not saying there wouldn't be protests, I'm not saying there wouldn't be backlash against metahumans, but I'm definitely saying all of America wouldn't suddenly be protesting Superman because Firestorm blew up Moscow. It reads as though we're looking for reasons to be political like the original Watchmen, but without any of the same sort of similar, coherent political rhetoric behind it. Doomsday Clock feels like an attempt to be serious, unlike Watchmen, which had some stuff it wanted to say seriously. A very important distinction that makes the whole political angle of Doomsday Clock feel completely flat and pointless to me. Also, every time we get to Black Adam and his little gang of metahumans, my mind checks out. None of it feels important to the main story, and it is not interesting enough on its own to carry my attention. I can barely stop myself from skimming over these parts at this point in the series. I do have to say, I sound a lot more critical than I actually feel about Doomsday Clock as a whole. I enjoyed myself throughout this series more than I haven't, and the long publication time of this thing, especially with all the delays, as much as that's a bit annoying, it probably has prevented me from truly getting sick of this thing. And I really loved issue 10, which has Dr. Manhattan taking a walking tour through the history of Superman. The 13-year-old in me certainly enjoyed watching Dr. Manhattan master magic simply by observing Etrigan, Zatanna, and Constantine for a few moments. It's neat how the overall plot in many ways does follow up on what happened to the original Watchmen universe. And it's a great little detail that Ozymandias' original master plan did not at all work out, and Rorschach's little move at the very end of the original Watchmen story did indeed unwind everything Ozymandias had planned. That, if you ask me, is great insight on the part of Jeff Johns and a nice payoff to those final moments of the original Watchmen. There are a lot of great things worth enjoying here, but there's an awful lot wrong with it too. I did intend to recap more of the comic than the first little snippets at the beginning. We were supposed to cut back to it at some point, but as I started writing this script, all of these criticisms started to flow out of me. My brain, in spite of itself, has picked up on a lot of these problems. But still, somehow, I think I would recommend this series. I have no interest in ever seeing any Watchmen characters show up in the DC universe ever again, but this specific ride, for what it is, was a unique experiment I didn't hate. I really still think there's enough to enjoy in this comic in spite of all its problems that it's worth reading for yourself if you haven't yet. Sure, a lot of the story is pointless, and there is no good reason to make it 12 issues long or for it to drag out for over a year. Yes, the larger mystery behind Rebirth doesn't seem all that much given the crazy amount of build-up and hype behind it. And yes, this was always a cheap attempt at a cash-in using the name The Watchmen, and the final product is barely a step away from that. And oh sure, nobody in their right mind asked DC to do any of this in the first place. And yes, the plot is like 1/100th as intricate and as well thought out as the original Watchmen. Okay, maybe I should stop right here because I'm clearly talking myself out of liking this comic. But let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Do you agree with these criticisms? Do you have your own thoughts and feelings about it? I'm curious what people have to say. And finally, don't forget to like this video and keep reading comics.